బయలుదేరుతున్నాను ఇది పడవుతున్నాను.
Before formally starting the program, today's program, I would like to announce that during the last 2 years, we have lost many of our important members who were closely associated with Cinemontage activities. It is a great loss to the society, and we could not pay them any formal condolences due to COVID restrictions. They are Mr. Vijay Shankar, Meghnad Pudhankar, Shangita Chakravarti, Madhu Kejriwal, and Pioneer Mohan. I use this forum to pay a formal condolence to the departed souls. I request all the members to observe 1 minute silence.
Welcome one and welcome all. I, Ketki Sarde, welcome you all this evening to the annual Gora Ganguly lecture. I have been a part of Cinemontage since last year and am honored to come here today. To be honest, I was unsure of whether I could understand parallel cinema when Dr. Rota invited me for a screening. But after viewing the movie, the name of which I cannot recollect now, I understood that cinema is about the stories it depicts, rather than their belonging to the mainstream or parallel cinema. We gather every year to pay our tributes to Gorada, one of the founder members of Cinemontage, which is the oldest film society in Central India. I invite Mr. Jaishankar Pillai, Dr. Ruta Dharmadhirani, and Dr. Kartik Banerjee to pay floral tributes to Gorada. year, we also pay our tributes to the legendary Satyajit Ray on his birth centenary year, Sri Chidanand Das Gupta, an esteemed filmmaker and writer on his birth anniversary and centenary year, and Mrs. Aparna Singh, a renowned actor and filmmaker herself. These luminaries made the cinema movement as it is seen today possible. Satyajit Ray and Sri Chidanand Das Gupta started the Film Society movement in 1947. Sri Chidanand Das Gupta brought forth cinema criticism and created the seminal work on life and cinema of Satyajit Ray in 1980, when Pather Panchali completed 25 years of its existence. Mrs. Aparna Sen has numerous movies to her credit, which include 36 Chaurangi Lane, Japanese Wife, and Mr. and Mrs. Arya, to name a few. She has contributed landmark movies to the body of cinema. It is seldom seen that a single family has a lion's share of contributions to the film field of parallel cinema. Today, we also celebrate this luminous family whose contributions continue to enrich the world of cinema. I would like to welcome Dr. Prantik Banerjee from the Department of English, Hislop College, on the behalf of Cinemontage. He is Associate Professor, Department of English, and former IQAC Coordinator at Hislop College, Nagpur. He is a member of Board of Studies, RTMI. He is an external expert to the Board of Studies, Mumbai University, Homi Bhabha State University, B.G. Vazai Autonomous College, Mumbai, and the MA English Academic Advisory Committee of Christ University, Bangalore. He has been a keynote speaker and resource person at several international and national conferences. He has delivered endowment lectures in the University of Rochester, USA, Loyola College, Chennai, Jyoti Nivas College, Bangalore, and the Royal Bhutan University. He has served as subject expert on the selection committees for appointment of lecturers at St. Stephen's College, Delhi, and Xavier's College, Mumbai. He is a certified HRD trainer from TCS, Bangalore, and has conducted several teacher and corporate training programs. He was invited as an expert on the drafting committee of NCCI's National Higher Education Policy. He edited the Kakoodkar Committee Report of National Institutions of Technology. His publications include 4 books, 9 book chapters, and 41 research papers in peer-reviewed journals. His recent books are Cultural Studies, Texts and Contexts, and Theory in Praxis, Discourses on Literature and Culture. His writings have been published in several anthologies, including Globalization Reader, Nomadism Reader, Asian Literature in English, Films and Literature, Conflict Studies and Race, Caste and Gender. He serves on the editorial board of several international and national journals on higher education as well as English studies. He is also a poet and short story writer. His writings have been published in Sahitya Akademi's Indian Literature, Little Magazine, Pen International, Journal of Poetry Society of India, and Quest, to name a few. He was featured as Poet of the Fortnight in stanza of Femina magazine by the renowned poetess Kamala Das. The Writers' Workshop in Kolkata brought out his first poetry collection, a postscript on missing keys, in 1998. His collection of short stories, The Keeper of the Dead, won the CLR Award for Best Experimental Fiction in 2021. His second poetry collection, Crossing the Line, is currently in print. Dr. Banerjee is passionate about teaching and research. Besides reading literature, politics, sports and culture, he likes to spend his free time by watching movies and cooking non-vegetarian delicacies. We are waiting for an invitation to your home soon. He also loves to teach creative writing to youngsters. I take this opportunity to invite Mr. Tapas Saha to present Dr. Banerjee with a floral bouquet and book. Department of English at LAD and Smith RP College, Nagpur. She is keenly interested in theatre, film, media, gender and culture studies. She runs her college club Cinecon, which is affiliated to the Federation of Film Societies of India and is in charge of student welfare and quality assurance committees. A gold medalist in English from the University of Bombay, her doctoral thesis is on the cinematic works of Shyam Benegal, Govind Nihalani, Aparna Sen and Deepa Mehta, where she reads their films through the lens of literary and critical theory. Dr. Ruta has organized Kritya, an international poetry festival in 2011 and the Kirloskar Vasundhara International Film Festival in 2014 and 15 at her college. She is a certified trainer for the British Council to teach business English communication and spoken English and has trained students from different walks of life. She is an academic counselor for the Diploma in Creative Writing course for IGNOU. She translates literature from Marathi into English and is anthologized. Her research work on film and theory has had national and international reception. She has published book chapters and has taken up literature and film for analysis. She is an integral part of the core committee of the Vidarbha Literature Festival Nagpur, which is the only non-fiction literature festival in the country. An avid reader and cinema buff, civic and environmental issues, local entrepreneurship and promotion of handloom and handicraft also attract her interest. I invite Mr. Vijay Kupretiwar to present Dr. Dharmadikari with the floral bouquet and book.
Thank you.
Now I would like to speak a few lines about Cinemontage. Cinemontage boasts of a rich association with cinema since the past 40 years. Apart from the Sunday screenings, we have also conducted cinema seminars, appreciation workshops and small film festivals. Nuanced discussions about the films we watch are a highlight of our Sundays. I had the opportunity to discuss Ghere Behere last Sunday with Dr. Ruta, which ranged from use of lens angles to depict distance between the characters by Aparna Sen to violence and female agency in Gang of Wasseypur. Revival efforts of journalism have borne fruit in the form of Wide Angle, our in-house publication which showcases articles related to cinema. I invite Dr. Ruta to deliver her lecture titled Aparna Sen at Home in the World.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ketki. Ketki is the youngest member of our film society now. She's been with us, as she is introduced, for a year now. So I really thank you for taking this task on yourself of conducting today's program. Thank you so much. I take this opportunity also to pay my respects to the late Gora Ganguly on the occasion of 12th December, his birthday. And thank you Cinemontage for inviting me. It is an honor to be invited to deliver the Gora Ganguly Memorial Lecture. And this year we celebrate 3 names in Bengali cinema, which no longer belong only to Bengal, but they occupy center stage internationally. Today I am actually missing the presence of so many of our other Cinemontage members as well. And they are such a regular feature in this pandemic, has really created such a disturbance in all our lives. I specifically miss our President, Naire sir, but the pandemic and its new variants increasingly distance us socially and in many other ways as well. But just like so many of us, we are tied by ties of friendship and kinship. These three names, Satyajit Ray, Chidanand Das Gupta and Aparna Sen also were tied by family and mentorship. They were colleagues and each other's critics. They were mentors and gurus, disciples and daughter. So Cinemontage is not just celebrating not just Gurada's birth anniversary, but also Satyajit Ray and Chidanand Das Gupta's centenary years. Today's program is a momentous one on account of these triple celebrations. Aparna Sen, Chidananda Das Gupta's daughter, turned 76 2 months ago in October. The oldest film society, Cinemontage, in central India is commemorating these multiple events today. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to commend the challenging work that film societies in India continue to do. Gaurang Ganguly and his friends, some of whom are sitting in the audience today, Jayashankar Pillai, Pradeep Ganguly ji, Surendra ji Mishra, Tapas Saha, Mr. and Mrs. Kuprediwar, Mr. Fadnis, and those of us who have joined us virtually, Ram Taile sir and Vijayatai, were carrying forward the mission of the Film Society movement, which Ray and Chidananda Das Gupta passionately envisaged and formulated. They carried on the work here in Nagpur. It is not an easy task to keep the work of any film society relevant to the changing times, and Cinemontage is no exception. Ray and Das Gupta were a part of the groups of people who molded the Film Society movement as a socio-political space for discussion and conversation through the very personal act of watching a film in an intimate yet public space, not a single screen theatre as it used to be called, but in rooms with reasonably good acoustics, darkened for the duration of the film. The audiences for these films were writers, poets, readers, moviegoers, the elite of many a burgeoning metropolis. The greatest names in the Indian film industry were part of the Film Society movement and established film societies in their own hometowns and cities. One criticism which surfaces from reading about the film societies was that they became niche, they became eclectic, and they also became just spaces to watch world cinema, which did not see theatrical release in India. The discussion and conversation on what made the film good or bad, what appeals to the viewer, what did not, what did the lighting do for the script, what was more brilliant, the directing or the editing. These post-screening discussions dwindled, and then the Film Society movement became the poorer for it. But when we turn to Chidanand Das Gupta and look at his contribution to the world of cinema and film criticism, his writings on cinema dealt with form, function and directorial style. He was not just the founder of the Film Society movement, he founded it along with Ray for many other reasons which he thought Indian cinema needed a theoretical and academic base. He and Satyajit Ray defined the writer-director film critic relationship. There was much synergy between the two, and Ray's biographers and subsequent academics have highlighted this relationship in their works. There has been recent scholarship on the Film Society movement in India, its two phases, and its journey through debates and differences amongst its own members. I'd like to take this opportunity to, because we are celebrating Gaurada, who was so passionate about keeping the Film Society movement alive. And Jayashankar ji had made a promise to him on his deathbed that he will ensure that it does not die out, that Cinemontage will stay completely alive and kicking. I thought I would, share with you some of the reading that I have done. In a volume published to celebrate 50 years of the Federation of Film Societies of India, Chidanand Das Gupta had written, and I quote, "Film societies, by screening, discussing, reading and writing about good cinema all over the world, create a higher level of artistic taste and thus build up a better and bigger audience for good films within the country. By stirring up interest in the creative cinema among cultured people, films a sense of cultural new wave of understanding helped regional cinemas to also be included for screening in the film societies. Ray himself had written a letter to a friend while speaking of the Calcutta Film Society, which he founded with Chidanand Das Gupta in 1947. He writes, "We have acquired a bad reputation among professionals as conceited, highbrow theorists who do nothing but debunk Indian cinema. Film societies had taken upon themselves, the earliest ones, the onus of educating audiences on what constitutes good cinema. They organized film festivals, procuring films from foreign embassies, and that was huge. That used to be huge challenges, and these challenges were met with aplomb by committed film society members with a passion and zeal of the newly converted. Young Indian directors learned from their exposure to the French New Wave and Italian Neorealist cinema. They tried making films that broke away from the formula set by mainstream Hindi and regional melodrama. Art cinema in India grew from and was deeply embedded in post-independence, post-colonial cinema. The socio-political struggles of the first 3 decades of Indian independence were reflected in the tumult within the film society movement also. From 1965 to 1980, much happened. The Naxalite movement, the 1971 Bangladeshi war, and the national emergency imposed by Ray, Ghatak, Benegal, Shahani, Mrinal Singh, all these directors and filmmakers found their cinematic voice in and around these political upheavals. The influx of refugees, the food crises, voiced itself in the avant-garde cinema of India. And Sen's Calcutta Productions, Mrinal Sen's Calcutta Productions, Ghatak's Last Epics, and Manikal's first film belong in these years. The effects of the emergency on popular as well as they wanted whatever was happening in the country to be reflected in their cinema. They drastically wanted something radical. Why? Because they wanted good cinema to happen. Again the question, what is good cinema? Where it had largely been understood as a sophisticated aesthetic product, the mid-60s were the years in which these debates raged on and on. It pushed out this point that good cinema was one which was infused with a radical, leftist and even revolutionary political sensibility. One that had the ability to register contemporary social turmoil, and such remarks highlight the tension inherent in the movement. There were many issues which were also raised. Membership was restricted to people who only understood a particular type of cinema. women, there was an absence of women in the leadership of the Film Society movement. The widening gap between city-based film clubs and those in smaller towns. It drew criticism from people like Samik Bandyopadhyay and Shubhendu Dasgupta. And Bandyopadhyay had remarked at a function co-organized by 3 societies of Calcutta, Asansol and Nehati, that in a politically disturbed region like Imphal, there were 2 active film societies that held film appreciation courses and also hosted film screenings, even as armored trucks rolled in through the city. But these film groups rarely received a mention in metropolitan Cineclub discussions. An interesting fact that I read was that G. Aravindam also noted in the 1970s that the real movement is not in the cities, it is in the small towns and villages. And here he was referring to a small remote village in Karnataka, Heggodu, whose Ninansa Film Society was founded in 1973 and it hosted a film festival where nearly 1,000 people attended the screenings despite the fact that it was harvest season. So a whole lot of movement towards democratization of film society was happening and these debates continued. From here I then now turn with this thought that there is a great deal of work which film societies did in terms of really bringing world cinema to smaller towns and cities which were completely inaccessible. Yet the various inherent tensions or the various kinds of debates which took place around the areas which I mentioned has often led to also people from the social sciences who were members of film societies also take the opportunity to showcase screenings or rather to talk about cinema. For example, the Economic and Political Weekly or magazines like Mainstream and Frontline also made space for discussion on film. Film academician Rachana Muzumdar reflects that despite their commitment to democratic ideals and emphasis on viewing cinema as an object of intellectual debate, film societies failed to arrive at a more nuanced understanding of the larger audience and their love for popular cinema. Even then, film societies stayed in their niche areas of educating people as to what is good cinema, whereas we find post-70s and post-1980s in the heart of the parallel cinema movement, we have fresh insight and fresh vision from a person like Aparna Sen, who was born and brought up in this culture, yet carved a niche and forged a path on her own. So therefore I now turn to, with this thought of what the Film Society movement actually did and was, and we are currently also facing many challenges of keeping our own cinemontage relevant to the times. What did Aparna Sen, who grew up from this kind of background, what did she do as a filmmaker? Aparna Sen grew up inhaling these debates and challenges of making meaningful cinema. Aparna Sen has come a long way from the painfully shy 15-year-old girl appearing in her debut acting role in Satyajit Ray's trilogy, Teen Kanya. Excuse me. She appeared in the short film, the last part of Teen Kanya, in the final short called Samapti in 1961. Aparna Sen, born on 25th October 1945, grew up in a household steeped in films, poetry, music and literature. Her famous father, the film critic and film historian, Chidanand Dasgupta, was her central influence. She spent her early years in the burgeoning artistic community in Bengal. The first ever film she watched was Pathar Panchali. In fact, her father did not allow her to watch any mainstream cinema in any language. Fed on a diet of curated cinematic fare, it was no surprise that her first directorial venture was not mainstream. But despite this strict, intellectually rich fare, Aparna Sen acted in many Bengali mainstream films, much to the dislike of her father. This experience helped her in defining for herself the kind of cinema she herself wished to produce. In 1981, she made 36 Chaurangi Lane, a film about an Anglo-Indian English teacher in a convent school in Calcutta. It was a bold step to take for a woman to direct a film which brought into the limelight a small community of people who were born on the fringe, on the margin, living in a very inhospitable liminal space. Violet Stoneham and others like her defined old school gentility, urbane and cultured old world charm. They were the relics of the Raj. Indian audiences were unaccustomed to sensitive portrayals of a community which had always been and was seen as the unforgiving ruler, and yet now that same community was relegated to existing on the periphery, on the outside, looking in. Only 34 odd years after the tumult of independence, this was a film that was not castigating the English as offensive colonials, but a community of hybrids with nowhere to go, no place to belong to. They were a class of refugees which was, in the words of the critic Homi Bhabha, unhomed. The unhomed space which Anglo-Indians like Violet Stoneham, that space which they inhabit, is an in-between space, neither in nor out, somewhere in between private and public. In this very unhomed space which Nandita and Samaresh use, her student and her fiancé, they used to be at home with each other. The camera work in this film lovingly captures every hybrid detail of the domestic space in her flat in Chaurangi Lane. That space is definitely hers. She has defined that space with all the artifacts that she understands, which belong to her life as crossed over pre-independence to post-independence. She has seen the changes that have happened in her society in Calcutta, and she herself has taken that change from one world order to another has been no less traumatic for her as it has been for the rest of the Indians who are not of mixed blood. Yet how she manages to convey the sense of belonging for herself in that space is suddenly violated when two trusted souls whom she trusted and put faith in and whom she treated as friends violate that space and make it no longer home for her. It's an irony where she again is no longer able to, she doesn't know where she can go anymore. Violet Stoneham's little flat in an old building in Chaurangi Lane, where the lift is always out of order, is her haven filled with typically English furniture covered in floral upholstery. The old gramophone, its records, the cat, the china, the crockery are distinctively Anglo-Indian. Aparna Sen was fantastic in her meticulous attention to detail. I forget the name of the art director, but it was her personal touch which she made sure that the whole essence of the Anglo-Indian life was translated onto the screen. Violet Stoneham opens her home and heart to her student Nandita, longing to ease her loneliness, really believing that she and her fiancé needed her, not her home, as a space to indulge in premarital sex. Loneliness and unhomeliness mark this beautifully sad film. It's a poignant poem to a lost generation. The last line of the film, as she sits on a stone bench that she utters to herself, are from King Lear, the Shakespearean play that she teaches. Yet another proof of her being the quintessential unaccommodated man, in this case the woman. The spaces of home and the world are beautifully demarcated in the stunningly feminist film called Paroma, which she directed next. Aparna Sen crossed many thresholds when she wrote and directed Paroma. Traditionally, women have been written into the narrative of the Indian nation. In film, from a masculine, heteronormative, patriarchal perspective. Women have been socially constructed as the other of, not as equal to men, in a social structure that perpetuates it for a gender-based and dominant ideology. Women have been socially constructed as only gender, and their sexuality has been a site of contestation and negotiation. In the interests of patriarchy, the men needed the women to stay in carefully designated spaces of the home, while men were defined by their dominant roles in the world. The paradigm shift in this ideology begins to take place only when the women understand this domination and begin to resist it. Even though during the social reform movement of the 19th century and the national freedom struggle, women were included in mainstream activism, the point to be noted is that post-independence, they were expected to return to the inner courtyards, to the domestic spaces, and conform to a pre-colonial space and societal position. Aparna Sen's Paroma brilliantly showed this framing of the woman in traditional frameworks of domesticity, tradition, and spirituality. Partha Chatterjee, in his book Nation and its Fragments, describes how the new nation needed its women to follow the rules of patriarchy. Why? As the representation of women in post-independence cinema also therefore followed this trajectory. Paroma defied these rules and prescriptions of ideal womanhood as portrayed in countless Hindi family socials of the 60s. Aparna Sen could not brook the rampant stereotyping of women to fit a national and hegemonic, predominantly Hindu idea of how a woman should be portrayed on screen. She gave Paroma a voice as well as agency. Paroma chose to not stay within the prescribed boundaries as she had earlier been framed. She has an extramarital affair with Rahul, the photographer. He too frames her in his pictures. She is beautifully captured by his camera's lens. Ironically, thus, she is under constant surveillance. As a wife, daughter-in-law, and a mother, she is the go-to person in the household. Nothing functions well without her. Yet she is bound and limited by this traditional domestic space where she is the ideal. The family, as the smallest unit of the nation state, allows her no autonomy of will and desire to be a woman. For her, both the private as well as the public is a veiled and surveilled space. It is veiled in terms of the limits set by the hegemony of masculinity, but also by the acquiescence of the woman herself. She herself limits herself within the proverbial Lakshman Rekha. Her space is continuously surveilled by the family, community, and then by the state itself. She cannot be allowed desire outside the domestic space. And then when she does unlimit herself, she finds herself in this movie yet again surveilled, this time framed by her lover's camera lens. Here too, Paroma is limited by what her lover wants and cannot exercise her free will. Those very camera shots lead to the exposure of her social crime. If you remember the film, the photographs that Rahul takes and she doesn't know even that he is taking, he publishes them without her consent and they come back to be discovered by the husband. And overnight thus, she is an outcast within her own family. Out yet in the family, in, yet a pariah. She chooses to walk out on her own, delimited, so that she can inhabit spaces of limitlessness. Aparna Sen's Paroma problematized the women's question. The film is an exposition of post-colonial Indian femininity, making the Indian woman the subject of her own narrative. In a nation that was as yet constructing itself and imaging itself on the masculinist notions of purity of its women. Over the wide expanse of a filmography, the film director in Aparna Sen has focused on the enigma of a woman. She has written and directed 16 films in 3 languages, Bengali, English and Hindi. From her debut directorial venture 36 Chowringhee Lane in 1981 to her most recent The Rapist in 2021, which is now doing the rounds of the film festival circuit and has already won the Kim Ji-seok Award at the Busan International Film Festival this year. In all the films she writes, she directs, she nuances, she writes and directs her own films. She writes most of her films, almost all I think, almost all. She nuances each character so that we understand the impossibility of defining any person, categorizing them to slot them in convenient roles that society has prescribed for us. She refuses. In all her films, she maintains categorically that she aims to bring out the human in the person that she explores. Her cinema is rich because the subject of each film is contemporary. Her characterization is layered, and each subject has explored contemporary womanhood of that particular time and essence. She chose projects which excited her cerebrally and more importantly emotionally. She wrote screenplays herself when she could. She made her daughter Konkana audition for the roles she knew Konkana would inhabit effortlessly. She carried forward the legacy of serious art film from her mentor Satyajit Ray. Her father Chidanand Das Gupta, Ray's friend and a film critic among other professions, was a sounding board for many of her ideas. Aparna Sen, the woman, the actor, the director, the screenplay writer, the single mother, the divorcee, the indulgent parent, the rigorous taskmaster, is many women in one. In Paramita Ek Din, Aparna Sen uses the flashback masterfully in a non-linear narrative. As Violet, just like Violet and Paroma are alone, so are Shaunaka and Paramita. An unlikely Saas-Bahu friendship that sees an empathetic bonding between 2 women in a family whose husbands are incapable of providing for them, both physically as well as emotionally. The women find they have much in common. Indifferent husbands, children born with disability, love of poetry and music, strong, intelligent personalities. Their friendship grows after the death of Sanaka's husband. Aparna Sen confronts the myth of the ideal woman as happy and content in domesticity, which is being perpetuated by national iconography. If you're married, you're fine. If you're married, you're very, very happy. She completely dismantles these notions. Shaunaka is vocal in her unhappy situation, yet finds no escape from the drudgery of having to look after a schizophrenic daughter. She grudges Paramita's ability to divorce her husband and marry another man who is kind and caring. And Aparna Sen herself plays the role of Shaunaka to perfection. She is full of frustrated fury, mindful of her lost youthful desires, and in the end, dying alone yet surrounded by family. Cared for by a woman who no longer is a part of her family. Paramita comes back to her erstwhile married home because nobody else was able to look after Shaunaka the way she could. Sen explores the meaning and nature of relationships, affinities, and emotional bonds between women. The sisterhood of pain and emotional suffering is very impressively portrayed. Much can be said about Aparna Sen's other and equally important and culturally significant statements on the woman's question. She would not like to be called a feminist filmmaker, nor does she answer to being a woman filmmaker. She has continued the legacy of meaningful cinema, the kind she grew up around. Her daughter Konkana has featured in 3 of her films, and all the performances have elevated the narrative to a height of cinematic perfection and ease. Konkana's portrayal of Meethi in 15 Park Avenue is instrumental in limelighting mental trauma, schizophrenia, and identity trauma within children of disability. Aparna Sen never offered solutions and therefore is a very good director. She directs a narrative and then lets it take her where it would. She depicts facets of womanhood that the modern Indian woman grapples with in a postmodern world, where relationships are more fluid and the space of home and nature of belonging are no longer recognizable boundaries. In 15 Park Avenue, Meethi is constantly in need to go home, a home which does not exist except in her deranged mind. Her sister Anjali's reality revolves around the sacrificing of her own desires for a normal life, which she is denied on account of having to look after her deranged sister. Thus, Anjali's predicament is similar to Shanaka's, but her handling of the situation is in keeping with progress made in the dynamics of family, home and belonging. In 2005, Anjali is an intellectual, a university professor of quantum physics, who can choose to look after her sister in a bonding that Shanaka, as a middle-class Bengali housewife of the 80s, could not. Aparna Sen asks us the question, is there no country for women outside the prescribed notions of patriarchy? Where does Meethi go? The film ends with Meethi going into the house with the address of 15 Park Avenue. Where is 15 Park Avenue? Where does Meethi go? Where will Violet Stoneham go? Is there a country for women where there is no patriarchy? Where will Mrs. Iyer go from Mr. and Mrs. Iyer? If not back to the domestic space which will circumscribe her in the traditions that she herself stepped out of during her enforced close encounters with a Muslim. Will she not go back to those traditional spaces having stepped out? How will she be allowed herself to be circumscribed? Where will the Indian woman find the solidarity she needs, if not outside patriarchy, in a sisterhood of her own making? Aparna Sen's recent remake of Tagore's novel and Satyajit Ray's Ghare Baire, called Ghare Baire Aaj, was for me a tad disappointing. But that is not to take away from an ambitious retelling of a much-loved classic that defines these very spaces of the home and of the world as traditionally feminine and masculine. We need to revisit Aparna Sen in these new and unprecedented times, to remember her roots as well as the new voice which she lets her daughter articulate and carry the family torch forward. They break all stereotypes, the mother and daughter duo, yet do not forget the legacy their father left behind for them. Thank you.
After an illuminating talk about Aparna Sen, I now invite our presiding guest, Dr. Banerjee, to deliver the presidential address.
Good evening, everyone. I think Cinemontage took a big risk in having not one, but two teachers to speak. And like any teacher who has the habit of not letting a class go for at least 48 minutes, Ruta has done her 48 minutes, 42 minutes. 42. Yeah, 42 minutes.
I was given 40 and overshot with.
Right. So, but the risk here is greater in my making a few observations and comments, because normally, whether I teach in Hillsborough College as was introduced, and normally in a class, whether there are 4 students or 40, I don't let go of the class till I do 48 minutes. So I suppose, but first of all, thank you so much. Thank you, Cinemontage and Tahir sir, as well as Jai Shankarji for taking that risk of having me over. Jai Shankarji was very polite enough when I said ki I'm no film scholar. I just watch films, and so I came here to be no expert here. However, after Ruta Dharmadhikari's wide sweeping narrative on the growth and development of the Indian Film Society, I think she started by touching on one of the most important things, and that is the very reason for the birth of the Indian Film Society, and also the fact that in a small town, in a small place 25 years, 30 years back, my father was in Indian Air Force, and so when he was transferred here, he took VRS, voluntary retirement, and that was the time when we used to stay in Vayusena Nagar, and I still remember that there were generally two places which were my haunts. One was the Sunday screening of Cinemontage. Cinemontage would screen a variety cinema early in the morning. It wouldn't be a matinee show or an evening show. They would screen films at 9. And normally, in such screenings, first of all, we had to actually literally wake up the gatekeeper, to get an entry into variety cinema. And usually there were 6 or 7 people. Of course, the leader of the pack was Gorada. And I still remember that, there was somebody, the screen operator once even asked, कि सर आप लोग आते क्यों हैं? जब आप सिर्फ 7 या 8 लोग ही आते हैं, तो why not watch it maybe on a VCR before a TV, Why take the trouble? Well, Gorada being Gorada, told the man that, well, cinema is to be watched on the full screen, on the big screen, right? And television is only for soap operas. So it is a fitting tribute that we, when Ruta talked about the very reason why film societies should be in India, and also the fact that Gorada single-handedly, I think, made possible for all film lovers in Nagpur the opportunity to watch not only the best of Indian cinema, but also world cinema. I'll take forward a few comments and observations of my own. I'll develop from Ruta's talk. And I think one of the things that I remember as I was listening to her was, I don't exactly remember the film director, but I do remember the film named Selma, which I think was an Oscar nominee for in 2014, where we all watched Oscars, and where I remember her saying, the director whose name I forget, she said, that when a woman makes a film, that itself is a radical act. For a woman to make a film itself is a radical act. And when I think of what Ruta talked about, Aparna and her filmmaking career, I think her entire film career, and a very illustrious career, is a vindication of this statement that this film director of Selma made. When I think of Aparna Sen, I know we are celebrating three very important figures. Three important figures, not only who have sort of put Indian cinema on the map, but three figures who continue to, whose relevance and influence continues to make its imprint felt even in today's times. And of course, we are talking about Chidananda Dasgupta, we're talking about Satyajit Ray, and we're talking about Aparna Sen. And when I think of Aparna Sen, I would like to, I'd like to look at her through the lens of three frames. Three frames come to my mind. One, of course, is her father, Chidananda Dasgupta. And when I think of Chidananda Dasgupta, the father-daughter relationship which Ruta has touched upon, I think it is from her father's immense and very impressive scholarship, film, not just film scholarship, but even literary scholarship, that Aparna Sen inherited her a sort of an aesthetics of sensibility. From Ray, whom she called Manik Kaka, who also happened to be one of the closest friends of Chidananda Dasgupta, I think she learned the craft of filmmaking. But the third person, and you might be a little surprised, the third lens or the third frame through which I'd like to see Aparna Sen is that of Rituparna Ghosh. Because for me, to think of Aparna Sen is to think of a tradition of filmmaking, film aesthetics and literary sensibility that was given to her first by her father and then by Satyajit Ray. But to think of Aparna Sen also is to think of that continuity of that tradition, the carrying forward of a classical legacy and her influence on the works of Rituparna. So what I'm trying to say is that when we think of Aparna Sen's film, there is a sense of connection between the past of Bangla cinema and the present of Bangla cinema. I see a continuity there. You know, when we talk about the history of cinema, any cinema, whether it is Bangla cinema or national cinema, timelines are not just chronological, because every age, every period, and the best of filmmakers are not really limited to the kind of films, radical, revolutionary, art house, parallel, or even for that matter mainstream and popular. Their influence is not limited only to that particular period. And for me, when I look at Bangla cinema altogether, I find that it is Aparna Sen who sort of, in her films, brings together the legacy and the tradition of Satyajit Ray, as well as her own influence on younger filmmakers, among whom comes Rituparna Ghosh. So this connection between past and present is something that is mediated through Aparna Sen, and I think that is one of a singular contribution to Bangla cinema, to the development of Bangla cinema. You know, when you think of Aparna Sen, I said to make a film, for a woman to make a film itself is a radical statement, is to do something that breaks the glass ceiling, is actually confirmed by the fact that when she came onto the scene, I mean, of course, by then she had already become one of the hottest stars in Bangla commercial cinema. I mean, I remember, just to digress, my mother's name also was Aparna, and she too was a Dasgupta. And when Aparna started acting, you know, there were a few people within the family and relatives who thought that my mother had come onto the screen. And so there were letters written to my grandfather saying, is Aparna now on the Bengali film scene? She was as strikingly beautiful as Aparna, by the way. So, the 1980s, by the time, by the time of the 80s, for instance, Aparna's career, I mean, she herself has told in many of her interviews that she had got fed up with the kind of formulaic films and the kind of stereotypical roles that were being given to her by Bangla film directors. Of course, she had acted with Uttam, she had acted with Soumitra. I mean, she was one of the leading ladies and at one point in time of a cinematic rival to Suchitra herself. But by the 1980s, she realized that she had to do something of her own. I mean, this was, she was getting into a rut. And I think the 1980s was also the right time for somebody like Aparna Sen, a woman director with a unique sensibility, with a unique narrative style and cinematic aesthetics. Primarily because if you think of 80s, and I'm sure that, all our Bengali dadas here, who love watching Bangla cinema. I mean, this was the time when Bangla cinema had touched its nadi. I mean, particularly the early 80s was considered to be the dark period in the history of Bangla cinema, because after all, most of the directors who were making Bangla cinema were doing formulaic plots. And there wasn't really neither any innovation nor any experimental cinema that was coming out. It was here at this point that Aparna came with what is called as middle cinema. And I say the word middle cinema, which is, she sort of brought forward or combined very adeptly, she blended the classicism of Shottuyit Rai with also the demands of popular cinema, with the demands of the market, with the demands of the audiences, the Bangla audiences, particularly the middle class audiences. In the 80s that Bangla cinema lost the middle class audience. And I'll come to that maybe in a couple of minutes, if you allow me. A couple of more important observations that perhaps I would like to make. One is, whenever we think of Shottuyit Rai alongside Aparna, two labels come to our mind. Shottuyit Rai as the humanist and Aparna Sen as the feminist. I mean, these labels are very convenient labels. They do help in understanding the nature of a filmmaker's work. But labels can also be limiting. And labels can also sort of tag or slot a filmmaker and limit the experience of the audiences or limit the response of the audience to the filmmaker's style. I would say that while Aparna Sen, when we talk about Aparna Sen and Shottuyit Rai, both were feminists. In fact, Aparna, as Ruta rightly said, Aparna has, in many interviews, she has sort of, she dislikes the word, she hates two words. In fact, one, she says, I hate being called a female film director. And she also says, I hate being tagged a feminist filmmaker. So she dislikes being called a female filmmaker, and she dislikes her work being called as feminist films. And the reason is, I mean, this is from her own words, the reason is that nobody calls Shottuyit Rai a feminist filmmaker. Is Shottuyit Rai called a feminist filmmaker? No, not really. And yet, if you think about his films, particularly a film like, let me say, Mahanagar, if you think of his film, perhaps Mahanagar is one of the most feminist films made not in Bangla cinema, but Indian cinema, or even in world cinema. So Aparna Sen's argument is quite a valid one, that why is it that women directors when she started filmmaking, there were just a handful. I mean, Bangla cinema, if I remember, other than Arundhati Devi, there were not too many Bengali female filmmakers. I'm using the word female filmmakers maybe so that you could connect with what I'm saying. There were hardly a few female filmmakers, film directors. And so Aparna was, as I said, breaking the glass ceiling in a male-dominated landscape of Bangla cinema, where the work of titans or the great maestros like Satyajit Ray himself, Ritwik Ghatak and Mrinal Sen, the work of these three greats was looming large. It must have been very difficult, intellectually challenging and imaginatively daunting for somebody like Aparna Sen to burst into, or to rather break into this landscape. So feminist, is Ray a feminist and Aparna a humanist? As I said, labels aren't restrictive, and we have Aparna Sen herself who says that she wouldn't like to be called a feminist films. Although much of the scholarship that is produced, much of the interpretation that is done, especially by researchers on Aparna Sen's body of work, quickly uses the label of feminism. I think even if we are to suppose that Ray was a feminist and so was Aparna a feminist, I think there is a distinction between the two feminisms. There are many feminisms, there isn't one feminism. And if Ray was a feminist, which in a sense we should agree, because he had this wonderful ability to understand the female psyche. So, and of course, in many of his films, he's talked about, or he's handled or engaged with women's disempowerment, women's subjugation. So, any filmmaker who handles women's issues can legitimately be called a feminist filmmaker. Well, so Ray is a feminist filmmaker, and so is Aparna. But are they the same? Are their feminisms the same? I personally feel that they aren't. There can be any number of feminisms, and Ray's feminism is different from Aparna Sen's feminism. And I'll give you just one example. This is a film, Ray made a film called Piku. Now this was a commission work when the French government requested him to make a film, and he made a film in Bengali called Piku. What is Piku about? Well, it's actually a short film. It's a short film about it's about a day in the life of an 8-year-old boy named Piku, and therefore the title of the film is Piku. But the main focus, Ray's main focus in the film is not the boy, it is the boy's mother. The boy's mother, who has an adulterous relationship with somebody that she knows, a family friend. And the film opens on a day when the husband confronts the wife, saying that he knows that she's having an affair, and he leaves for office. On the same day, coincidentally, it is her son's school holiday, so the son is there, and yet she has this clandestine. She keeps this clandestine appointment with her lover. Without going into the details of the story, the climax of the story is where she has an ailing father-in-law. And while she's making love in her bedroom with this family friend, the father-in-law has a heart attack. And there is a close shot where, in fact, there is a montage between Piku, the boy, who is sent away by the mother and her lover to paint in the garden outside, and the old man in his room going through the last throes of a heart attack, and she and her lover in the throes of lovemaking. Who played the role of Piku's mother? Aparna Sen. She plays the role of the character of Shima. And notice, names are very important both in Ray's films as well as Aparna Sen's. Shima. Shima is the name of the mother. Shima means boundary. So here is an example of a woman transgressing or breaking the boundary. But that's not the more important point. The point was that years later, Aparna was asked by an interviewer, And in the course of when she was asked about her work, she said, while the shooting was going on, she could not shed tears as she was told by Satyajit Ray, her Manik Kaka, to do on location. She just couldn't cry because she felt that this portrayal, the way Shima, the mother, was shown, that Ray was not being fair. This is a film in 1980. Now fast forward to Porama came in 84. So fast forward to 84 and you have Aparna Sen making Porama on more or less a similar situation, except of course the dynamics of family politics is a slightly different one here. But here also there is an outsider. Remember, whenever we think of Ray's films and Aparna's films, there is again one similarity that I find, and that is the role of the outsider. If you remember Charulata, if you remember Ghore Baire, Ray's Charulata and Ray's Ghore Baire, there is always an outsider who comes from the outside in order to disrupt the so-called happy domesticity of the family. Here too, both in Piku, which is of course Ray's film, but in Porama also, as Ruta described, you have the NRI photographer, and he's the one who comes in order to do a series of photographs on what is ironically called the Indian housewife. The Indian housewife, right? Now think of this. The analysis that Ruta did, of double framing the woman and framing the woman in such a way that the Ghore of Satyajit Ray, the woman is only in the Ghore, and the man who is supposed to be the mover and the shaker, his pursuits are in the outside, that is Baile. And so it is the man who has to come from the outside in order for the woman to step out or transgress the boundary of the Ghore. And this is what Porama does. And in one of the most, when the film came out, it was like a cinematic slap in two ways. Or rather, I should mind my language. It was a cinematic slap on the Bengali Bhadralok mentality. And I think also, I may be wrong, but I also feel that because Aparna disagreed with Ray in the portrayal of Shima, this was a kind of a retake or her own retake of Ray's Shima in the form of Porama. Well, far-fetched as it may seem, I think there is a narrative here, there is a connection, because Aparna himself in an interview said that I didn't agree with Satyajit Ray, I didn't agree with Manik Kaka. And on the contrary, why it is not far-fetched again is that when Ray was asked whether he was unfair to cast a mother as a reckless woman, you know what he said? That, well, the role demanded, Shima's role demanded. Why? Because an adulterous woman cannot but not be reckless. Now clearly, whatever we are to make of Satyajit Ray's comment like this, clearly for a woman, both as somebody who has acted in Satyajit Ray's films and now has started on her career as a filmmaker, I'm sure she would have carried forward that thought. And I firmly believe, therefore, that Aparna's Porama was a rejoinder, was a revision, was a retake of Satyajit Ray's Piku. And that is, for me, the turning point. That is announcing the arrival of Aparna Sen, not just as a filmmaker, but stepping out of the shadow of Satyajit Ray and starting a wonderfully fabulous career as an author. Yeah. So, like I said, Poroma is also like a cinematic slap. I've already spoken for 30 minutes, so I think, but I do believe that it's a cinematic slap on the Bengali Bhadralok mentality, which Ruta talked about the colonial mindset, the colonial hangover that particularly Bengali men suffer from, and it's a colonial mentality that, or a hangover that wasn't just prevailing in the 19th century but continued even today. So is race feminism therefore different from Aparna's feminism? Yes, it is. Yes. Because Ray himself was perhaps the perfect epitome, the perfect symbol of the Bengali Bhadralok. The Bengali Bhadralok has this sophisticated intellectual, very refined, sophisticated intellectual, but one in whose films, therefore, love, even if it transgresses, in Ray's films, whether you take Charulata or Ghare Ghore Baire or any other film, even when the woman transgresses, or Ray shows a woman up to come outside of marriage in order to break a moral code, this particular thing is sublimated or subsumed. Either in a cause, either in a higher realm of literature, think of Charulata, think of Amol, and you think of literature, poetry. Or it is subsumed, Ray subsumes the hint of physical love or an adulterous relationship by subsuming it to the higher realm of nationalism, as in Ghore Baire, Bimola and Shondip, as in Ghore Baire. But, and this is the last point that I want, if Ray and Aparna Sen are feminist filmmakers, their feminism here is crucially different. Why? Because as I said, Ray continues to be the holder, the legacy of the Bengali Bhadralok from the 19th century to the 20th century, and therefore even in his films such as Feluda, Feluda is supposed to be for Bengali boys like me who were growing up with Feluda stories. Feluda is the ultimate symbol of Bengali masculinity. Moghul Shastru, brain power. He believes in brain power. But somebody, for a teenager like me, growing up with Feluda stories, with Ray's Feluda stories, the one thing that I miss the most, that Feluda didn't have any love interest. There was no woman in his life. And at an age when I'm thinking of romance, I'm thinking of having a sweetheart, I was thoroughly disappointed, and I continue to be disappointed when I read Feluda stories even after so many years, and I find there's no love, there's no woman, there's no girl in his life. Now this again, I wouldn't call it prudishness, but I'm saying that this was the impact of the concept, the notion of Bengali Bhadrata on Ray. That any physical intimacy, particularly adulterous intimacy, within the sacred precincts of a ghor was not considered to be a feature of what is called Bhalo Bo, the good wife, the angel in the house. And Aparna Sen broke this and continued to do it even in Poromita writing, which you mentioned, because the relationship, Shomitra has a minor role there, but Shomitra, remember, is again an outsider. And Shonaka. And Shonaka refuses, she still continues to have Shomitra come and visit her and financially help her. So Poroma, I think, was a breakthrough film, not just for Aparna Sen, but in changing the landscape of Bangla cinema, as well as the way in which sexuality and women's agency and women's identity have been made in Indian cinema. So with those, I think, observations, we could have continued. I would have loved to continue with an adda, not just talking about my observations, but I guess I've already exceeded my time. And I said, Jaishankar ji did take the risk of having me to talk, so, but I'll give my words a viram. And because the main speaker is Ruta Dharmadhikari, and I suppose if there are any, I think I leave it to a comrade to do the rest. Thank you so much.
When we think of movies, most of us imagine larger than life tropes, which pack multiple elements of life in one package. Today, the talks from our guests demonstrated the many faces that cinema takes on to influence our lives in different ways. They have deftly brought forth various aspects of the doyens that we honor today. We were offered a glimpse in the life of Gorada from a personal lens by Dr. Banerjee. He highlighted different shades of Dr. Ruta's talks while adding his own colors on today's literary canvas of Mrs. Aparna Sen. In the vein of celebrating women in cinema, Dr. Banerjee effectively spoke about feminism and its myriad forms. A recent Malayalam movie, The Great Indian Kitchen, set in a Brahmin household in Kerala, also explores feminism by showing a woman's struggle with patriarchy and her liberation from a restricted family. We had the pleasure of learning about Film Society movement from multiple facets through Dr. Ruta's talk. She wonderfully highlights how parallel cinema can successfully connect with a wider audience, which is unaccustomed to finer details of cinema and instead connects with the people. An excellent example of a niche movie which touched people and had a successful run at national and international movie festivals is Gang of Wasapi, which is set in a small town in Uttar Pradesh and shows violence and family dynamics. With this, I invite Shri S.N. Mishra to propose a formal vote of thanks.
Friends, it is a matter of pride for us that Dr. Karthik Banerjee presided over today's program and also delivered a very interesting and keen presidential address on certain aspects of Bengali cinema, and Dr. Ruta Dharmadhikari, who delivered the Gora Ganguly Memorial Lecture, are both members of Cinemontage. At the same time, we cannot forget that they are persons of distinction in their own right and occupy distinguished position in the society by dint of their knowledge, merit, and exceptional service to the vocation of their choice. On behalf of Cinemontage, I express our thanks and gratitude to both of them for having accepted our invitation despite contesting claims on their time and grace today's function. I'm sure all of us in the audience shall certainly benefit from the thoughts, observations made by our speakers today and gain a better understanding and appreciation of what cinema is all about. I have also to express our thanks to the management of Bengali Educational Society for their goodwill and unstinted support to Cinema Montage. I also thank all of you in the audience for taking time out on this solemn occasion to be present here, and not only to have made the program a success, but have also contributed to the decorum of the occasion. Thank you all once again. Thank you.
Before we take a short break, I would like to make an announcement of the arrival of the 5th Orange City International Film Festival, which will be held on 18th and 19th December at Kavi Kulguru Kalidas Auditorium, which is at Persistent Systems, IT Park, Nagpur. Now we would take a short break and assemble outside for tea. Thank you.
यहीं पर बैठिए, यहीं पर कर देते हैं, यहीं पर बैठिए आप।